Welcome to Fall Enclave. Really happy to see many people. We're delighted that Joyelle McSweeney is our first reader in the Fall series. And I will tell you who's coming up if you don't know. October 4th is Cole Swenson. October 11th is Carla Harriman. October 18th, Erica Hunt. October 25th, Rodrigo Toscano. November 1st, Susan Gewirtz. November 8th, Monica Yoon. November 15th, Charles Alexander. November 22nd, Liz Willis. November 29th, Lady Long Soldier. So really excited about having all these great people for Enclave. And Ray is going to introduce Joyelle today. Just a couple things about Ray. Ray has a couple of recent books, although she has a total of 14 books of poems. Wobble in 2018 was a finalist for the National Book Award, and she has a book just out from Wesleyan Conjure. Her book Burst in 2009 won the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Critics Circle Award in 2010. So delighted to be doing this series with Ray, and Ray's going to do our introduction.
Okay, thank you, Jeanne. First, the facts. Joyelle McSweeney is the author of prose works, novels, plays, a critical volume called the Necropastoral, Poetry, Media, Occults, as well as 3 books of poetry. So she does it all. Redbird, The Common Dream, and Other Poems, and Toxicon and Arachne. Redbird won the Fence Modern Poetry Series Prize, and her play Dead Youth or the Leaks won the inaugural Leslie Scalapino Prize for Innovative Women Performance Writers. She teaches at Northwestern University, where she may be sitting now, I don't know. In April of this year, Dan Kiazon, I never know how to say his name, writing in the New Yorker, described Joyelle McSweeney's new work as a poetry of catastrophe. And that seems just right. He was writing about her latest book, Toxicon and Arachne. I discovered the book well before I read the review, so I'll be giving you my own take, but it overlaps with his in some parts. I was blown away, almost literally. McSweeney's writing has the unstoppable energy of an avalanche. Her pleasure in and skill with language is what you might notice first. The poems are full of what I could call manic wordplay, except the word play seems inappropriate given the book's disturbing content. Toxicon, the first half or the first volume of this double volume, even includes a crown of sonnets dedicated to Keats, perhaps the best recent sonnets since Bernadette Mayer's. Perhaps. McSweeney's writing is more fractured, wilder. If the Flarf poets and the new formalists had a brilliant, rebellious daughter, it would be Joyelle McSweeney. Or if Bruce Andrews and Sylvia Plath, well, stop there. The pleasure taken in and given by linguistic gymnastics in her work is consciously perverse, tainted by the subject matter of the poems, which in Toxicon is our poisoned, diseased, and weaponized world. This toxic environment, which of course includes our own bodies, is especially critical for the author of this book because when she wrote it, she was pregnant. To catastrophize is to worry obsessively about things that may not happen. And we are all told not to catastrophize these days. I think we do it, though, as a kind of inoculation against disaster, as if we could avert catastrophe just by thinking about it, or, like McSweeney, by writing about it. Yet the disasters keep coming, or we keep bringing them on. The quote from Toxicon, The joysticked boys sink arrows in the ozone. If we can't have bees, we'll have drones. And the sonnet sequence invokes not only the TB that killed Keats, but the bird flu waiting its turn to kill the rest of us. The factory farmed chickens that, to quote McSweeney, tote their viral loads on wheel, on wing, on breast, transmigrate the globe and upload souls. Which brings me to the second part of the book, Arachne, a nightmare that comes unthinkably true. It is named for Joelle's daughter, Arachne, who died at 13 days of age. In this section, the writing changes somewhat. McSweeney gives us indelible particulars of the tragedy, which someone else might have suppressed. I can't think offhand of anyone else who would write, "I thought she was so cute, so cute. It was a cute death." McSweeney is not so much being shocking as writing from a state of shock, and it rings absolutely true and heartbreaking. In the midst of this, she doesn't lose her affinity for language, though it may bring scant comfort. She thinks of the useless draft baby soap she has been given and writes, "What a name for a baby soap, dread plus bereft." In another poem, she writes that she is hemorrhaging rage, and you see the word rage in the word hemorrhage. A rage directed at fate, perhaps, but also at the poisonous world we've made and must now live in. So the book couldn't be more timely. I don't know whether she'll read from it or from something newer, but now here is Joelle.
Thank you so much for that introduction. It's an incredible gift to have your attention, Ray, and actually everyone. I see so many names here of so many people that I have admired for a long time and considered my brother and sister publishers and poets, and I feel like I am so lucky to be in this company of poets today. I was saying before the reading started, it seems like the days just keep getting darker, both literally and figuratively here in September. And it's nice to be able to spend an hour doing something else. So thank you so much for having me. And of course, it's also an honor to be leading off on a series of luminaries like this. So again, thank you. Okay, so I am going to read from Toxicon Arachne, and then I do have a couple new poems to read towards the end. And I think I'll just jump in. I think everything Ray had to say really rang really true for me. The first book, Toxicon, I was thinking a lot, like all poets do, about Plato's Pharmakon, the threat that Plato construed as being present in writing, and that it was both a toxin and the cure, potentially both there at the pharmacy of writing. And I was thinking about that a bit, but I also felt that I wanted to, because we're swimming in this toxic soup of toxicity in every kind we can imagine it, I wanted to create a book of poems that would make good on the toxic part, that would like kind of initiate the toxic part of lyric poetry, that would speak to the purity and both the sublime venomousness of lyric poetry and how it really sinks its tooth in your heart, and how that tooth is also the thorn of the rose of time. So I wanted to write a book that would really go all the way in that regard, that would seek for a really fanged lyricism. And then when I did my internet research and learned about the etymology of the word toxin, I learned that it comes from the Greek for arrow, and specifically associated with like a poison arrow. And then that really helped me both to think about writing a book that would be a quiver of poison arrows, that would pull up all of my uncertainty, all the binaries I found myself caught and confused between. Exuberance and dismay as a big pair of moods for this book. Contamination, yes, but also possibly turning into some new and potent form, since those are some cultural myths we have about the possible, maybe becoming the benevolent monster that has been with us since Frankenstein and Godzilla and everywhere else. Maybe I could just consider Godzilla benevolent. So that's the mood, and that is the velocity of Toxicon, which was supposed to be a book of poems, like a book of poison arrows. And because I opened myself up to those energies of the world, it's true, as Ray said, that it ended up capturing these motifs of the incoming succession of like avian flu images from around the world of terrible disasters, man-made climate disasters, all kinds of things started like kind of flowing alluvially into the soup of Toxicon. And so rereading it now, we can see a lot of news stories and precedents and things that ended up, unfortunately, like flowering in the moment that we're in right now. Even getting away from my own personal story, can read a lot of it through. So I think I'll just jump in and read a sequence of poems from Toxicon and then maybe a short sequence from Arachne. So to begin the Toxicon, it begins with a detonator sonnet. And here's how it goes. And it's in italics, right? Because that just like doubles down on the intensity of the lyric. So here we go, detonator. Ah, Duralex, ah, Sominex, ah, me, what dream drifts down in time release? A punch and beauty show, a bunch of sphinctery kisses. When my Timex addressed the lazy hearse, some text unhorsed it. Some pulse endured like a burr or a bon at my wrist. A tufted blush rilled behind the nicotine-stained mountainside. Was it you, lady? Tulips on slender stems re-summoned the hearse, which would not splode a second time. Nay, the obverse, it sighed till a moon roared in from Amnion and finished it. Studied drone. So after a beginning like that manages to be both about drone warfare and some medieval logic and incipit of beginning, we move through to this poem that I'd like to read, which is called Drill Down in the Fly Room. And it was written thinking about the police violence, the tide of kind of murder and violence against Black people and people of color, which of course has thankfully become as visible as it has always become prevalent. Then here's how this poem goes. Drill down in the flying room. One lidless eye wants to close, one pupil wants to contract, one valve wants to over-emote, two arms want to cramp instinctively back into their fetal attitude of flight or hug their own spine from the wrong side. What is it to survive? Or lie cosseted in a coma, a bombilation of effects, a thicket of causes, white-eyed, black-fledged, quiver of hyphens falls like arrows through the centuries, closes the skull, camera obscura, drape of error. The dash cam spills its ribbon of data up in green pools above the blood bank. In dim cloud stars rise. Each breast wears a badge that brays like a crowned truth in the grave. This smashed clock stays right all day. Under the coroner's saw, the heart bears a crown of burst vessels. The sapiens is diademed with cabochons and fractures. It's coronation day. The morgue drawer rolls back. Coldness is a lack, yet here's an increase. Morning unrolls its bombazine. This next poem is called Vagus Nerve. There are lots of nerves in your body called vagus nerves, and that word vagus, I suppose, from Latin means wandering. We have wandering stars and we have a wandering nerve. It's a kind of maybe a bit of pre-modern anatomy that attaches to a pre-modern language that attaches to modern anatomical language. And it's quite amazing, which I also found out in my Keats research, how much all of this figurative language, what seems figurative to us, like pertains to anatomical language, even of the most dire conditions. And I suppose we've learned that with our coronavirus, our novel coronavirus. The fact that this language, this imperial language of Latin sticks around with its imperial effects, for good or bad, when we learn the worst news of our life, is really an interesting thing to think about for language. An arrow that comes across the universe and finds you. Vagus nerve. Like a star who snuffs out its own path, like a czar who wears a many-beamed trinket on his chest, like a target for a taser or a laser-guarded stent, quasering throb that knocks the breast of the ocean-going vessel, fist-sized wren or cardiac Event, vein choked with the plush that coats the stag's rack, stoked gland or glitch, pumping out error in the constellation Lyra, in the second most glamorous star, the second to be daguerreotyped and assassinated, stepping out of its car, galactic half-life, neural leap, no wider than a single bacterium's weak air's hairline, who chokes up at the opera, eyes glued to his lorgnette, ting-ting in the operating theater where the gods all cluster at the trompe-l'oeil dome and suppose an even more monstrous eye looks back. Who can swallow the view? A pupil. Who can take the whole thing down on his knees in the back room, on the back of in the sacristy, and vomit it back up on the bar, on the altar, on the street, outside the viper room? Who chokes on the skein winding from his bolt like a colt's mane? Extravagance, consciousness, prize sheep that can bleat through its cut throat, pleat that can spread like blood on the waves and fetch a price that makes the wind rise and hurl fleets at the future. Nerves pinch at the side and hold the garment up in rictus, grin and say, alive, whatever's too much is the prize. Like a dog returns to its vomit, to appraise it once again and cart it off for a price, and the neck of that doggy star can bend. I think one thing that unites a lot of these poems also is the idea of arrival. The idea of art's arrival is something that really interests me, and it's something that the arrow's flight let me think about. How does a poem rise and how does it fall? And thinking about the arrow's flight also helped me edit a lot of the poems and think about how they came one after the other. So the arrow's flight was important to me for thinking about art's arrival. But another thing I had to think about, obviously, and certainly after Arachne's birth, was event. How does calamity arrive? Where did it begin? Where do we find the beginning of it? Do we have to go all the way back to the beginning, to the Big Bang, to find the set of chemical properties that led us all the way down these paths of agony that we find ourselves walking down? Where did it begin? Was it for this? And I think this poem I just read, that's a lot about stars and so forth, is thinking about that question. Another question is, how do we survive in a world made of violence, and thinking about our own role in the violence as people that violence is nearby, goes away from, comes back to, the circulation of violence around the planet, and what other routes of circulation it follows. So the poem I'm going to read now is an ode. It's for Alejandra Negrete, and she was a domestic worker in Mexico City, and she was killed, I think the date is July 30th, 2015. She was cleaning the home of a journalist who was murdered, and when he and some of his colleagues were murdered, their deaths, they were reported by name in the newspaper, and she was just listed as a domestic worker. And this triggered a movement and marches and protests in the streets of Mexico City by domestic workers, demanding that her name be said and that her life be valued. So I wrote this poem that says her name. I am the speaker, trying to account for my place in the circulation and the economy of violence, to which, as an American and as a woman, I'm linked in different ways. For Alejandra Negrete. Bleep, bleep. I get my neck out for the knife scene, a green smell, a green scene, because the nose bone's so close to the brain bone, and the brain doesn't have a bone, only a series of seawalls and sea barriers. Tennis balls roll oafishly over the sea and knock against the blood-brain barrier. A tennis brat oaths and curses, every kind of lapsus, every slip of the tongue, marshy, licky, metacarpals, flight of women chased into the sky, commingled constellations, spine bones and breast bones, finger bones and ankle bones, skyline and strip mall, stape and stirrup, platform sandal, skinny jean, Alejandra Negrete, executed in the bathroom on her first afternoon. The sound we call static is really full of activity, percussing and injuring itself and sending the message back through the seashell to the ear canal to beat against the heart. How long can it beat itself up? A fucked up clock radio broadcasts its handful of beats like gravel hurled at a seawall, bursts its plastic carapace apart. The heart of time. Hurl that phrase like money from the coach of death, made of pulp, germs, and linen, the blood of slaves, the work of women. Even Baudelaire and his crown of syphilis wanted to work harder. every day, wanted to become a clock of work. It rains, it hurts. Crown of thinking, jacket of spleen, jacket of little complaining proteins, cosseting the nerve, full metal jacket, magazine of coquettes touring the Louvre on the arm of Baudelaire, blushing into his notebook, blushing into a squib, even a kind of cream dissolving into the soup, even a kind of t-shirt around the torso of the teenager who is taking a break in the mass grave like a mall, breaking up with her boyfriend, reclining in her little plastic sheath. It's raining ropes. Which teen will fly out on the rope swing into the soup? Her body jerking the afternoon, thick as carrageen, its album of albumin, its cream-laid pages, jerk-off, azimuth, bitumen, bitter secretion in the back of the mouth, wing of madness, mass carapace that spasms, all the bones locked together and wing into the air as a clock strikes, as thought strikes, its crazy gong. The rope breaks, the teen plunges into the same river, sound keeps traveling, then it is gone. And then it comes back like an aftertaste. How much death can swim? How long after eating? Il pleut, it rains, ropes of cardiac tissue. Time, rope swings, credit union, bone fragments, platform sandals, 2-hour commutes. It rains all death's afternoon. Rereading this now, I'm struck by the passage about Baudelaire wanting to become a clock of work, because I think obviously on our lockdown pandemic time, sitting in front of our devices with their digital stamps, I feel like our relationship to work, those of us who have been home, has changed, and the whole length and digital length of the day has intensified as something that's digital, even as we're trying to take the most basic analog measures to keep a virus from spreading in a way that isn't digital, in a way that is exponential. So it's interesting to think about these things that are out of scale with each other and how we just keep trying to run an engine that'll let us get some control over it. I want to read just a couple of the sonnets for Keats. So yes, I was thinking quite a bit about Keats, like so many of us sometimes do. And because of my particular interest, I started thinking about the tuberculosis that killed Keats and how it both ended his life and actually made him posthumous by giving him the legend that it gave him, although of course he would rather have lived and not died at all. And thinking about what kind of time this gets back to what I just said, what kind of timekeeper is a tuberculosis bacterium? It's generations and it's doubling. What kind of commitment to eternity could tuberculosis have? So I started writing these sonnets that I really collected all the ideas, all the news, all the motifs that I usually think about. The sonnets started to feel like they were getting polluted and contaminated and overrun with something small and lethal like bacteria. But like a lot of the poems I write, this poem is really an attempt to think about my own veniality, my own role in all these global shapes. So this is a crown of sonnets. I'm going to read the entire crown actually on Thursday night as part of the Sonnets from the American Symposium, if you're curious about where this is going, but I will just read a couple. And the first sonnet just stages the writing of the sonnets, the thinking about the sonnet. So here we go. I read about the tubercle at night and I went under. As a crime scene can excite a drop of lumen to exude its hit of light, I shed wet light. I rep the motel room in light. I carry knives bladed with sputum and an instinct for spite, like a tree that reaches upwards for the heat and wants to burn, or lay me down in the slurry for the churned paper. Write me down, chum me, make me into chyme, spit me out to lay in sawdust like a germ, then burn me. I release a noxious smell. Dose me with aminoglycosides till I give in, then lay me in your litter. I'm a threat to life. I'm a threat to life, a violent butter. I spread my toxic inklings like a cloud-seeding drone and drop on crops my shake of violet water. As the clotted vena cava sucks dye for the camera, a violent thought turns all my justs to anger. A fist of cloud breaks the crowny crater, which vomits up its own grand crew, palpates the sternum of the sky for ulcerations. Oh, fish in flume, resting on your mutagenic breasts, who do you give your milk to? Oh, mouth that cannot close. Oh, planet cleft. What cache of weapons do you lean on as you dream in your pleural cavity, desertified, depressed? Bad host, you clutch your guest. Bad host, you clutch your guest. Green seam fluoresces in night vision, signatures of heat and flesh. Green ghost lifts headline to the camera, proof of life washed white by sudden flash. From satellite, Earth turns on spit like a gut infloresced with bad intentions. A god descends with gifts of poetry and plague. He lights up factory hens, a baffling intervention. They tote their viral load on wheel, on wing, on breast, transmigrate the globe and upload souls to heaven. Oh, Victor Bird, oh, Vector, I am like you, a non-state actor, death-pledged, alive, immune to all elixirs. I'm gonna skip one and finish this section with this. Like any light now breaking in the sky, I am the arrow. I ride and I decline. My throat's an ulcerated weapons cache where radioactive gun sites bleed their toxins in groundwater. Birds rear up, deranged. Their mitochondria are scrambled. They cannot steer by stars. I'm as disheveled. My lungs raise 2 black flags inside a warning. Boil like frogs, flap, release fawn-colored scum, skimmed from my lips, my only utterance, my spit is studied for its signs, gross Sybil. When death leans in, his staff's encircled by a viper. I adorn him with my spittle, with my cipher. So it goes on like that, being a crown of sonnets, and comes back around too. I'm interested in, obviously, how things come back around. This is a book that came back around big time for me. I'm so interested in things that are overwhelmed, things that, bad omens, things that are gonna come true and then do, as Gertrude Stein says. And it really came for me. So I'm going to read one more poem from Toxicon for the following reason. So last summer, I know that this image is reversed, so I apologize for that, but it's called Words That Do Things. As you can see, here's Mickey and Donald and Pluto doing things. It's already kind of chaotic and violent. And the reason I'm showing you this book is I remembered reading it at about 8 years old. It was published in 1976, the year of my birth, so I could have read it earlier. But this book made a huge, this is my Chapman's Homer, to get back to Keats. And specifically, there's an image in this book that has defined, I realize it now, and I went to my aunt's house 2 summers ago and found this book, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing, because this image that I remembered, not only did I remember it basically correctly, but it explains so much about my poetry. So I'm gonna try to show it to you from my Breaking Apart book. So this is to illustrate the verb throw, and I know the words are different. So on this side, we have Donald, and we have Mickey, of all people, being the malevolent one. He's gonna throw in a baseball. And then over here, I think you can see this, we have a demolished greenhouse. Of all things that you could illustrate throw with, and I'll read you this because I know it's backwards. So it says greenhouse demolished, glass shattered. It's got this fabulous parallel structure. Greenhouse demolished, glass shattered, wood splitting, flower pot smashed, seed boxes destroyed, and then it says crumble, shatter, and then path cracking. And down here at the bottom, we have the rose. Right there, my Sufi and Yeatsian rose in the demolished greenhouse. And I never forgot it. This is the page in the book that is torn and taped back in. I must have really studied it and puzzled over this demonic Mickey bringing about this total collapse and the pristine rose. So I tried to write, and I did write a poem called Hellebore. The hellebore is the Christmas rose. And I wanted to write about anger, and no comment, right? Anger and beauty, and the possibility that as a species, we Homo sapiens have eye spots for both anger and beauty. Something pulls us to both of them. Maybe the same thing. I don't know. Maybe we have to give up one and forgiving the other. I don't really believe that's true, but I think there's an intensity to these things that makes me think about what they have to do with each other. So I wrote this poem, Hellebore, trying to think about my own anger. And I realized as I was writing it that I was drawing the images from my Mickey Mouse verb word book. That was really my aunt's. Here we go, Hellebore. 1. Run it again, double the charge. What's the damage? Sign for it. The universe wheels around in its dishevelment like an afternoon drunk, rolls a wild eye, which is a loophole. Everything crawls out or goes in after it. This end time's gonna last a while. A cartoon toucan flies through the chemo suite, dripping sugar loops from its beak. It's on life support, on repeat. Its ink flows anti-gravitational, flinks from its flank. Both a ballpoint pen and a butane lighter, also useful for tracheostomy. An astronaut writes a check. A digital door swings open. Debt falls out like breasts from the cargo bay. Inside the jumpsuit, a port fails. Starving bears revolve on ice floes. The nest of ivies snakes like a flexible crown. Take it out on the holidays. Right back from the front. I am quite well, in hospital. Send that lotion I like. My hat is jumping out of my brain. My groin joints groan in the wind. Pigeonhole, egghole, hammer stapes. My skull carts around a trunkload of busted audio equipment I can't excise. Onionscapes do something remarkable in the dark. Only grow away. Grow through everything like toenails in the grave. Point the way. Demolish is a word I learned from my Mickey Mouse dictionary. The greenhouse is demolished, a political word, a representation of Donald Duck's anger. In Denmark, his name is Anders And. Anders And a feathered fist. Anders And a convulsive contract. Anders And a general contractor. Anders And, like a universe, slashes his own greenhouse, and anger fangs the rose with glass. 2. The rose, who has been quietly manufacturing her own fangs, now wears a diadem of damage on the upended tubs of fungicide and bone meal. If you label it poison, they will use it to kill themselves because they love to read labels and use things, those humans, and want to drown in the sea of the internet, like Freud said. Luckless civilians, citizen army, spirit level in the pitted brain. Kill me with that farming equipment. Kill me with that Ashbury poem, rutabagas and farm implements in a landscape. The British call them Swedes. Carve them up and put a candle there. On the face, a chancre grows, a chancre of light, a sad sarcoma that sags from the wink, fagged out like Fruit Loops, the beak of a toucan or fish hooks, the mutilated pelican. The hard C catches the breath and throws it back. The hard O sucks the exhaust pipe of industry. This lipstick is made of arsenic, leached from lead tailings, left over from a mining operation, and adorns the headless mountain with bright pools. We call that rigor mortis because it has such ethical rigor, like Simone Weil's heart wall breaking down, becoming broth to feed the rest of the starving body. When the teenager seizes in the driveway, her hatchback glides down into traffic on its own, its precious strew of heart wall leaching into the bloodstream. This poem forgot to be good. That teenager forgot not to die. Those 2 girls in Uttar Pradesh probably hung themselves. That mango tree colluded. That mango tree forgot to be ethical, listing its face towards a corona. It was trying to see around. It was trying to see around its burden. It was trying to blink out its blastoma. It was trying to comb the hair of the comet from inside its sclera, uvea, and retina, where its blood walls were branching in its eyes, its trunk turning to stone. Who streaks the sky with her long hair out behind? What prodigy? And besides, who gapes? Who gags? Who knifes open a gut to study what's clutched there? Let's empty out the ocean to store our plastic beads there, razor handles, mylar balloons, and other indigestibles. The fear of being a bad poem, the fear of a soul that would crush the palisade layer, the fear of a truncheon that would smash down the face bones, those onion domes and slender minarets, the fear of a bullet that would mark all the chests with its red line, its markdown, its infinitesimal expense. So I will end my reading of Toxicon with the farewell sonnet, which is the Terminator sonnet. Here it goes. And as you can see, it is actually somewhat circular. Under the dilate chestnut tree, some hunch infarcted like a rose, some puke entendrilled my chest wall, whilst rose flew sulked in my wrist. Above me, time flit like a leaflet bomb, alive with pleasure. From the nicotine-stained shirt of the mountainside, a tulip boomed seminal messages at the hearse. A DDoS crashed the DOD with remote determination. Oh, spring, open your mouth for me. Fool me once and fool me permanently. Nothing takes to liquor like a bum ticker, so lower your winch, settle your astroturf on me. For if the wing hath lost its engine, what then? Call Terminex, lady. Arrive with pleasure. So that was Toxicon. I had pretty much finished that volume, and I was rushing to finish it and show it to publishers in anticipation of the birth of my third daughter, Arachne. And then on September 29th, she was born. And she was born with an unexpected birth defect. She was flown away to another children's hospital. She lived 13 days and then she died. And all of a sudden, nothing. I mean, I didn't have any control over anything, but I had this little burst of writing in the spring because I was so angry that spring arrived without her. So there's that kind of combination again of rage and anger and beauty itself being as like unbearable and as present as anger. And also this continual questioning of where things began and how far back do we have to go to find the reason. Her birth defect is pretty rare and they don't know the reason for it. It's just a building error. So as far as any of us know, it's not genetic, it's not chromosomal, it's just something that happens in the womb and they don't know why. But it's my belief and my fear that in my lifetime we'll know why and we'll find out what chemical I was exposed to at what age that caused this to happen, caused my body to stow that bad thought away and bring it out at exactly the wrong moment. That's what I think. But we'll see. So I'm going to read some poems from Arachne. Okay, so starting with some poems that are angry at spring. This is a post-NICU villanelle. And it's set here, I'm in South Bend, Indiana, so the Rust Belt. That's another of my love-hate relationships with the Rust Belt. Post-NICU villanelle. Evening wear, the heron unfolds like a glove in the sky, 'cause it's spring. Peels back to expose the cool wrist of evening. Evening where the hero pulls off his armor and walks around the bedroom flayed, because it's spring, it's spring. The vets go down to the park on bikes with their bedrolls, their desert camo evening wear, even to sleep in the breast of the lawn in spring. Sweet rain with your radioactive pearl seating, the eyelet ribbon in your braid, this evening wear as lightly as you can upon her grave, but do not actually erase yourself from the scene. You make the spring come. And I consider that one a god who sits by your cribside and watches your monitor as evening wears on. Your green cursor blinks, your high alarm rises, a detonator is depressed, then released, and some fate arrives like spring in cardiac collapse. But before that, your unfocused newborn's eyes peer up from your elsewhere at the camera's eye, the heat lamp, your nurse, your father, and me, we for once align. Oh, my sore eyes in spring. As flower peers into flower and flowers, that odor unfolds, a cotton diaper newer than a newborn, not even once worn, the no scent of soap or air. I always almost wrote hope, but no hope. And every no evening, infant, no nothing spring, you collapse and collapse. Some flower lays its cool, clean hand across my eyes, and blind, I inhale you everywhere. Nearby and leaving like spring. So I said before that one of the curses of grief is how humiliating it is, how the most unbidden songs or images come back to you, not just of the traumatic moment, but also just, I feel sure that the chemicals involved triggered parts of my brain that I had not used for quite a while. And so at this time, I was accompanied in my grief by Duran Duran songs. And I wrote a poem, Simon the Good, to just conjure Simon the Bone, the blonde singer, and here. But I'm the speaker, as always. Here we go. I'm walking along the St. Joseph River here in Sept. And I'm the matron king of hell, in yoga pants and a disused bra for a laurel, and shatter that scene inside your simmering ear. Like a ransom scene filmed through a shattered transom, I smear in my glamour. I make as if to justify the ways of God to man. That's my ticket in. That's why God lets me speak here, Christostomad on his couch, even though I'm derived from hell, hellish, Hellenic. I'm the hanged man in this version, pegged up in mine pegged jeans by mine ankles, and in version, mine manacles are monocles. I spit out the key and squinty through the keyboard, back at the unquittable world. In my raiment of gummy sunglasses and crow's wings for epaulets, I delicately squawk from the edges of things, balance unsteadily on the bust of the goddess, squawk, Aeschylus, Euphorion, and I'm going to tell you something so bad that when you hear it, you'll know it's true. Like all the worst stories, it comes from the heart, and it goes there too. Back here in St. Joseph County, a struck duck flies crown first into the asphalt and is stuck there with brains for adhesives. Like someone licked the pavement and sealed it, a postolet with its cartoon feet in the air and its Jeff Koon wings. That's roadkill for you, realer than real. And the cars mill by with their wheels in reverse, heavy as chariots in a dealership commercial. And I am walking my dog by the river. A matron from hell. Look on me and despise. I am like the river, thick as beer and with a sudsy crown. There, polyethylene bags drape the banks like herons, and a plastic jug rides the current with something like the determination that creases mine own brow as I attempt to burn my lunch off. The determination of garbage riding for its drain. Hey, Nani, it's spring, and everything wears a crown as it rides its thick doom to its no place. Gently brushed by pollen, by the wings of Hymenoptera, like a helicoptera performing its opera all above Indiana, bearing the babes away from their births to their births in the NICU in Indianapolis. Annapolis, mooring God. You've turned me deophobic. The greasy tracks you leave all over the internet, the slicey DNA and the scrambled chondria, the torn genes panic like space invaders in an arcane video game. Oh, spittle pink blossom, the tree don't need no more, shook down to slick the pavement like a payslip. You disused killer app. Each thought strikes my brain like the spirals in a ham, pink for Easter, sliced by something machinic. Each thought zeroes in, flies hapless and demented, festooned like a lawn dart, finds its bit of eye, spills its champagne, split of pain. Then we come to our senses, suddenly alone in the end zone. So I'm going to end the Arachne part of the reading with the last poem in the book. It's called Morning Once and Eidolon. This was a line misheard by me. Eidolon means ghost in Greek, right? Morning once and Eidolon, like do I ever, right? It turns out I misheard it. It's this Big Star. The band Big Star has this song Stroke It Noel, and it's something like morning wants us to Eidolon. So both, right? Morning once and Eidolon. Here's the poem. That's a word poets love because no one else wants it. You can get it cheap. Eidolon, little light that leaks when a ghost leaves. The bruisey weeds in the garden, ungooglable and eyeless, closed around their seedy code, nearby and remote as on the edge of the galaxy. The Milky Way, naturally, they bend their necks under all that milk. Like we bent over you in your bassinet when death arrived with his postulet. Morning once and Eidolon. News we couldn't refuse. We had to accept. So stroke it, Noel, make it appear like static in the seance, ghost or house cat brushing by, the same spark that keeps the cursor lit and the neonet alive. My therapist says I need to divorce you from our crummy past together and set you to bob on the bow of the future and go walking towards you again like John Clare, always in sight and never at the hospital. But a line of dying baobab trees with their heels up in the green cheese of the moon, they say to each other, Let's leave the earth again. I want an eidolon, so stroke it no. At night, your sister walks through walls like it isn't hard, and it wasn't hard to return and to turn and gaze on your original face. Morning once, I only screamed when they turned the ventilator off, though you survived for 8 minutes. The time it takes a sunbeam to arrive, 8 minutes idiocy until we know the sun has ceased, enduring that beneficence, sans surcease. Morning wants an eidolon, like the song doesn't say. So stroke it no, which isn't your name. I'll say something so bad you'll know I mean it. The day you were born was the worst day of my life. Don't hold it against me, babe, that I mean it, and I'm so mean. I wake to canary-colored scaffolds, the contractor up in the eaves. It will cost $15,000 and the rest of the summer. I think of Shylock shouting at his window, refusing to accept the plot's final cinch. Shylock sulking at his loom in pre-Raphaelite attire, studying the shitty city of Shalott backwards in a mirror where everybody hates him for his beautiful hair, running down to the river wherein he may conveniently strangle or drown. Shylock, I love you, and I hate Belmont. Shylock, morning wants an eidolon, and it wants us to be happy, and it doesn't mind our sinful artistry one bit. I summon all mine vanity, virility, and fertility, and crash my plane into the abandoned nursery. I break my brainstorm down. I mean my brainstem starved of oxygen, eating itself, emitting its bleat like a nameless weed on the edge of the galaxy, fringing the galaxy's cunt. In that wrecked room, cool nursery, the pop song plays in eternity. On the toy turntable, a curtain lifts impossibly as the vinyl record spins. It feels the morning sun on its original face. So in the spirit of going on, which is what we're doing, right? We're going on. I thought I would read one new poem, if I can find it. Yeah, so this is a pretty much brand new poem. I'm working on a new thing called Death Styles. Obviously, it's an homage to Ingmar Bachmann, and it is just a daily attempt to be daily, a daily writing, a daily negotiation of in an unsurvivable world. Is it actual resistance to go on? What is the role of suicide in an unsurvivable world? In a world that doesn't want you to survive. So every day the death styles go on, and there's another poem. And this poem is the most mundane thing you could write about. It's about the goose poop in the park where I walk. We have a little foster son that we take care of, and he's about 21 months, and we go for a walk in this park every day, and it is just pillowy with goose poop. Just abundant. The abundance of the world. Thank you, universe. And so here's the poem that I wrote. And this is my last poem, so thank you, everyone. This is Death Styles 922, the Geese and Leaper Park. It just could not be more homely, but this is where we'll end. The cavity of air where the sea is missing, like a tooth wrenched clean at the root. We've taken lodgings in a harrow, a shirtwaist for my habillement, and you always in your hood, zipped in, my little nitrogen fixer, your tubby pea-shaped abdomen. I lately feel a sea cave screaming, and a bone widens temporally, tremens, but it comes to nothing. The sea doesn't even wait around to hear itself percuss and then rush out. The lungs hung with wet wool, its own shipwreck, and a throw of the dice can't alter its inconsequence. Nail bones rattle off the bays and chalk sighs on the queue. We walk along the vault bed in bankers' visors green. The strong breeze has swept the field clean of toddlers. Seabirds deposit a litter of shit and shells, so you could mistake it for a seabed, lit with a fleet of geese who clear their throats to indicate something indescribable as they take to the sky in a glottal paste to elaborate their messaging. 20,000 leagues over the sea, 20,000 deck chairs, 20,000 reading lamps, elaborately inverting and wickering, clanking in the sky. Don't look up, or the tip of that arrow may split you. The land dips and buckles, our socklings suckle and our soakings rot in rubber, whose tread signifies 2 decades of bad luck, this so far century's bad quintessence. Crabs scuttle with their arms bent decorously as if for breakfast to be placed there, a breakfast at the courts of law, a prayer breakfast, a scenic breakfast, a breakfast at the chemo suite, a working lunch, donuts outside the clinic before the protests, for all fetuses must live to breed and bustle for a groat, like goose or goat, feed bucket over handlebar, apron over gut, rosin over catgut, peruki over peruki, fabric fanfare that grips the livid throat, gullet that wants to rise like a gilt bullet in the breast pocket in the waistcoat, in the opera box, the waistcoat over the shirt waist over the waist over another waist, over the green lawn we trip, and hey presto, your signature, the glad hand of fate, to gather here in gooses, sup on swill, in sunlight, a second breakfast, a third. Thank you. Everybody take care of yourselves and each other. Thank you very much. Be safe.